I, Mustafa El Marong,
do swear that
I'll speak the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth,
and nothing but the truth.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
You may be seated, please. Good afternoon, sir. I hope you have had good lunch at TRRC cafeteria.
Very impressive.
Thank you very much, sir. Wonderful. Welcome to the TRRC. Mr. Marong, you're being called to the Commission to deal with a discrete issue, and that is the aftermath of the killing of Usman Koro Ceesay, and what you know as a member of the Council, AFPRC at the time, and also as a member of the Cabinet. Okay? This would be fairly short testimony, just to deal with that discrete issue. Sir, could you kindly tell us your full names, please? Mr. Marong, you were Attorney General of the Republic.
Yes.
You are definitely very fluent in English. I just want to ask you whether you wouldn't mind to speak in a local language for the purposes of your testimony. I know it may be much easier for you to do it in English, but if you would wish to speak in Mandinka or in Wolof, that too would be welcome. People out there want to hear, they want to know what is happening in the Commission. Some would prefer that some of the testimonies are held in the local languages. So I'm sorry to spring this one on you, but you are free to decide to speak in whatever language you want to. I know it would be much easier for you to do it in English, but if you would speak in Mandinka, that would be good for our audience. Leave the microphone on.
Okay, very well. I think being an educated man at this level, I think I will rather speak in English language to express myself very clearly.
Yes, you would be much more comfortable doing it in English.
Yes.
I'm not surprised, sir. I just thought that we could give that one to our audience, but unfortunately. But there you have it. What is your date of birth, sir?
I was born in 1952, 22nd December, Esau Village.
In Esau Village?
Esau Village.
That would be North Bank
North
region?
Bank Division.
Yes. And I want to lead very quickly on some of your biographical information. You went to Esau Primary School.
Yes, sir.
1958 to 64.
Yes, sir.
And then to Armitage High School.
Yes.
1964 to 70.
Yes,
Mr. Ceesay is smiling, the Armitage crew.
I see.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then you went to Yundum College.
Yes.
From 1970 to 1972.
Yes.
And from there you went overseas to the US.
Yes.
And you came back home with a degree in criminal justice.
Yes, sir.
And then you went to Forabe College.
College. Yes.
And you graduated in 1985 with a law degree. And then you went to Sierra Leone Law School from 1989 to 1990, where you got your BL. And you went to the Maritime Law Institute in Malta, where you got your LLM in international maritime law.
Yes, sir.
Since you graduated, you held several positions in government, first as a social welfare officer, probation officer, and you then became a public prosecutor at the Ministry of Justice, later on State Counsel, Senior State Counsel, and Attorney General and Minister of Justice.
Yes.
So in 1995, you were Attorney General and Minister of Justice, precisely from March 1995 to January 1996.
96.
That's right. And can you tell us what were your responsibilities as Attorney General and Minister of Justice?
Well, as Attorney General, I'm the chief legal advisor to the government of the Gambia. We also institute proceedings, both civil and criminal, to either prosecute or defend. And also we participate in affairs of running the judiciary in terms of providing resources for the recruitment of well-trained personnel to sit on the bench, among others.
And from what you have said in your capacity as Attorney General, you're also responsible for overseeing prosecutions that would be conducted by the DPP.
Indeed. Yeah. The DPP is subject to the Attorney General under the Constitution.
And which therefore means your office would have an interest in investigations of serious crimes that are committed in this country, investigations and ultimately prosecution of crimes that are committed in this country.
That's very right. All felonies, actually, we have jurisdiction to prosecute them. But in terms of investigating the crimes, that is exclusively the responsibility of the Interior Ministry. The dockets are sent to the Justice Ministry to look through to see whether there is evidence to go to court or not. But to actually investigate crimes, that is exclusively the remit of the Interior Ministry.
Very well. Thank you for that answer. In a sense, therefore, the Minister of Interior would have responsibility to oversee police investigations.
Indeed, yes.
And do you recall the events of 23rd June 1995, excuse me?
Yes, very well. I remember very clearly on the 23rd of June 1995, on a Friday, I was at home getting ready to go home for my usual weekend when senior advocate Usainu Dabo and one of his friends, Koro, came to meet me at number 4 Albion Place, where I was then resident. Mr. Dabo was inquiring into the arrest of Bakari Njai, former managing director of Gamtel, and his colleagues, and asked whether I had any idea about the arrest. I did inform Mr. Dabo that I'm not in the picture about Mr. Bakari Njai's arrest, neither any other arrest affected during my tenure as Attorney General. I was never been put in the picture, no advice was ever sought from us, or from the DPP, Solicitor General, or myself. And then I endeavored to call Edward Snate, who was then, in fact, to connect. Mr. Dabo informed me that the arrest was sanctioned by Mr. Edward Snate, the former vice chairman of the FPRC. Okay, I tried to call Mr. Snate at that time in the presence of Mr. Dabo, but I couldn't get him. And I told Mr. Dabo I was going home for weekend to my family, and I will do my best to call him. And then I did, of course, call Mr. Snate again on the 24th. At about 9 a.m., I called Mr. Snate, and his wife, I forgot her first name, but it's Sinyan. The wife comes.
You mean her last name is Sinyan?
Her last name is Sinyan.
Yes, proceed, please.
His wife. The wife told me Mr. Snate is going to the Independence Stadium. So I told her, please tell him to call me. The Attorney General is very urgent. And about 9:30 thereabout, Mr. Singate called me and said, my wife tells me that you left an urgent message that I should call you back. I said yes. And he asked what it was, and I explained to him that Lea Dabo came to see me in Banjul in connection with the arrest of Bakr Njai and his colleagues. And he wanted to know the reason behind it. And Mr. Singate told me that he thought that was not urgent.
Could you say that again and kindly speak up, please?
Mr. Singate told me that he thought the arrest of Bakr Njai and his colleagues was not an urgent matter. I didn't reply, I kept quiet. So I asked what was the problem. So he told me that they believed they had stored some vital information in the computers, and they asked them to provide access to this information, which Bakr and his colleagues were not forthcoming to comply with. And so long as they refused to have access to that information, or whatever information, I don't know, they wouldn't be released. So I told him, okay. I hung up the telephone. I called Mr. Dabo to inform him what Edward told me, and that was it. But later on, I realized during the course of the week, I came to my knowledge that, in fact, they were subsequently released after allowing them to access their computers.
But did you receive any other information that has something to do with Mr. Singate on that day?
Yes, very interesting. About 10, quarter after 10, Bemba Tambedu, the then minister responsible for works, called me, asking me, where are you, Mr. Marong? I said, I'm in my village on my usual weekend, on Fridays. I told him what was the problem. He said, it's about Koro. I said, Koro Ceesay? He said, yes. I said, what was the problem? He told me that Koro's vehicle, official vehicle, was found incinerated in the bush in Jambur. And there was somebody in the vehicle. I said, how many people were in the vehicle? He said, they found one person. I said, then if one person was found in Koro's official vehicle, then it must be Koro, because Koro was in the habit of driving himself. Okay. So after he told me that, I asked him, on Friday night, where were you? He said he was at the airport, all the ministers at the time, except those who went with Jame, chairman of the APRC at the time, FPRC at the time, who went with him to Addis Ababa. And I said, whether Koro was there. He said Koro was there, and they saw Jame off. Then I said, thereafter, what happened? They said they went home. I asked, after you went home, so what has happened concerning Koro? Did anybody see Koro? He said, from the information he obtained, Koro never got home that night. So I told him, okay, for me, right now I cannot leave. After lunch, I'll come. He informed me that ministers were going to the funeral home to commiserate with Koro's family.
At this stage, prior to speaking to Mr. Bemba Tambedu, you had spoken to the vice chairman of the AFPRC and the acting head of state.
Yes.
Did he mention anything about Koro Ceesay?
Yes, that's the point, interesting point I'm coming to.
Please go ahead.
So I asked Bemba Tambedu, I told him, Bemba, I just spoke to Edward Singate a few minutes ago. And he never, as Attorney General, he never told me anything about Koro's case. And that was really very strange. So I told him I would be coming after lunch, and which I did. I crossed to Banjul and then headed straight to the funeral home.
But before that, did you have the opportunity to speak to any other minister?
Yes, that was on my way to the funeral home. I spoke to Susan Rafa Ogu, who was then the minister responsible for tourism. I called her about Koro's death and I expressed my grief and sorrow for Koro. He was a young man. And I asked her, why is the government keeping quiet over Koro's death? Why are they not announcing it? Radio Senegal has already made an announcement about the death of our own finance minister, and the government of the Gambia is keeping quiet over it.
So you were surprised that the government is not announcing it? You were surprised that the government was not announcing it?
I was devastated, not only surprised. It was a disgrace that Senegal would announce the death of our finance minister. And our own government, whom Koro was serving faithfully and sincerely, dies or is murdered and burnt, and nothing has been said by the government. And she told me that she spoke to Edward and that it was like hitting your head against the wall.
What do you mean by that? Can you explain that?
That's the expression she gave, but later on I discovered what she meant when I spoke to Edward.
Tell us about it.
Yes. Now, when I spoke to Susan Rafa Ogu, I went to the funeral home, because it was after the funeral home I called Edward. So let's take the sequence. So when I got to the funeral home, Master Ceesay, Senior Ceesay, welcomed me and told me to sit down. And
Who is Senior Ceesay?
It's Koro's father, or...
Yes, Koro's father.
Koro's father. And he told me to sit down, Mr. Marong. So I explained my sympathy to him, and I explained to Master Ceesay that Koro and I were the only civilians who sat in council. Yeah, council and cabinet. Cabinet is everybody, but council is soldiers and two civilians, the Attorney General and the Finance Minister. We were the two, and normally Koro and I sat close to each other during council meetings. And I told him that Koro's death must be investigated. As Attorney General, I'm giving you the promise that Koro's death will be investigated.
At this stage, you expected that this was the natural course of events?
There could be no other way.
Proceed, please.
Born out of human decency, definitely. There is no other way that Koro's death must be investigated, because I believe it ought to be investigated, because I was council member. And I want this to be investigated to know who were behind Koro's death, and not all council members. Well, sometimes friends can betray each other like they did to Gilo Caesar in Ceesay's play, or Coriolanus in the Warrior of Corolla, one of these Shakespearean plays. Friends betray each other. But I want to make sure that I, as a friend, I will not be about or in a boat where we lay a conspiracy to kill Koro. I have no reason. Others may have reasons, but not me. And then,
at this stage,
this moment,
yes, did you have any suspicions
yes,
as to what might have been the reason for his death? or the cause of his death?
His death, I believe, is $35 million. That a sign that the government at the time could borrow money on behalf of the government. And I testified before the Janney Commission that $35 million was negotiated by Ibu Jallow, the former spokesperson of the FPRC.
Was it officially, under Gambian law, was it part of Ibu Jallow's responsibility to represent Gambia government in the negotiation of a loan of that magnitude?
Well, FPRC was a government of, let me not say, I mean,
please say it.
Following the law. It's an aberration. You see, these people were drunk with power. For them, they say, as Antoinette says, l'état c'est moi. That's what they believe. I'm the state. I have the power. So they didn't care about the law. This is their belief. And how can a spokesperson negotiate loans on behalf of the government when the finance minister is there, who's the statutory person to negotiate and conclude loans? That was an aberration. And I testified before the Janney Commission. There was no amendment to the Loans Act to allow Ibu Jallow to negotiate $35 million loan for the government when Koro Ceesay is there. And that raises suspicion. Why was Koro put aside? This will link up with his murder. Obviously.
So
when I was at the Ceesay home, Ibu Jallow called from Addis Ababa. He called Master Ceesay.
May I just take you up on that? At this time, Ibu Jallow was not at Addis Ababa. He was en route from. He was in Libya. Ibu Jallow was in Libya.
Anyway, I think he went with either Yahya Jammeh or.
No, Yahya Jammeh went with Kababajo.
To Addis Ababa.
Yes, and
Anyway,
Ibu Jallow was in Libya.
Ibu Jallow called and Master Ceesay and told him. I was seated next to Master Ceesay, and he told him that the AFPRC will investigate Koro's death. They leave no stone unturned. I'm not aware if ever any stone was torn up till today. I don't remember.
Were you convinced when Ibu Jallow gave that undertaking?
Oh yes, because when I made the statement to Master Ceesay, Ibu Jallow was not there, and that was just a few minutes after I told Mr. Ceesay that Koro's death must be investigated by the government. Then later, Ibu Jallow called, saying that Koro's death will be investigated, no stone will be left unturned. I'm not aware of any stone that has been torn up till now.
Well, we will come to that.
Yeah.
We would come to that. So you left the Ceesay home.
Yes.
And then what happened next?
Then, yes, I called Mr. Edward Singate about Koro's death. You know.
Tell us what
Edward,
you discussed.
Yes. I told Edward, I'm just coming from Master Ceesay to commiserate with him on the death of Osman Koro Ceesay. And what I heard from the Ceesay family, Koro's death was foul play. Yes.
How did he react?
Oh, yes. As soon as I mentioned that, there was a crescendo in his tone of his voice. His voice went up. And as I say it's murder, I said, no, I didn't say that. I'm saying it's foul play. There's all evidence to show it's foul play. Because the father said Koro has no business whatsoever. Koro's father said Koro had no business whatsoever in Jambur, let alone in the bush. He has no business there.
So from day one.
And then he said, this is what he told me. I don't know where he got his evidence. He said Koro's death was an accident. And as Attorney General, the 24th, that was the second day one will assume Koro died at night, maybe late at night, but 24th is the next day. There was no information sent to the Ministry of Justice, no docket sent to us to say these are the circumstances surrounding Koro's death, and the conclusion is it's an accident, and they are seeking advice. There was none.
So you are suggesting that at that early stage,
Yes.
Mr. Singate could not have had the evidence that would enable him to conclude that Koro's death was an accident.
It was a preposterous proposition to say it was an accident, just out of the air, like a talisman.
Or he knew more.
That others didn't know, perhaps. But that was not an accident. According to the father, that was not an accident. His son,
So essentially from day one, the father concluded that the killing of his son, the death of his son was not accidental.
yes, that was Master Ceesay's belief, and that's what I believe, and most civilian ministers believe Koro was killed. And I'll tell you why. When there was a cabinet meeting on the second day, I think Koro was buried on the 27th of June.
But before that, let's go take it a step back. In your conversation with Susan Wafa-Ogo, did she tell you the reason why the government was not making an announcement?
Yes, she did not. She only used the expression that she spoke to Edward Singate, and it was like hitting your head against the wall. That was the expression. So that could mean anything. For example, refusal to do something.
Did she tell you the reason Edward gave her?
She did not. But this is why.
Did she mention anything about advice from the pathologist?
That is not Susan, it's Edward.
All right.
Because when I came from the Ceesay family, I asked him, Edward, why is the government quiet over Koro's death? Radio Senegal has already made an announcement, and our own government, we are quiet over it. He said the pathologist, I believe it was Dr. Fred Oldfield, advised that no announcement be made until after the post-mortem. I couldn't understand. I said, but I don't understand this, Edward. Why should the pathologist tell the government, no, don't make an announcement on the cause, on the death of your own finance minister? It's not a medical problem. We, as a government, owe it a duty to Koro's family and the whole country to tell them, well, this accident has happened and Koro Ceesay has died. That's our responsibility, even if he's stopped there.
When
Radio Gambia cannot announce it unless they have the authority from the government to announce it.
How did he react to that proposition?
He refused. And I told him, Edward, the continuous silence of the government over Koro's death is sending bad signal to the country. It's sending the wrong signal to the country. So it's better. But Edward will not. So it was after I spoke to him, I then realized what the expression hitting your head against the wall meant. Because obviously.
And what did it mean to you, having heard Edward?
Yes, having spoken to Edward and his insistence that no announcement be made until after the pathologist's report, post-mortem report. That's what Susan meant by hitting your head against the wall. He was not going to cooperate. He was not going to say anything about Koro's death until he felt the time was right to make the announcement. It was after the burial of Koro Ceesay at the, I believe it was Dipakunda Cemetery. I was there, I went very early. with my driver and orderlies. Edward met me there, came along with Yankuba Toure.
Did you hear what people were saying during the
Well,
burial?
the indictment was against the government. They ascended the council, particularly soldiers. They killed him. This is your body, your corpse. I mean, it was quite clear. I mean, really, if we are anybody knew that Koro's death is not a natural death. It was not natural, because how could Koro be seated in a Mercedes-Benz car? It's burning. Koro is sitting there alive, and he couldn't open the door and escape. Obviously, nobody will believe that. I believe that Koro was killed and was put there and lit up. Koro was a martial artist. He's strong, young and strong. He could have broken through the windshield and escaped. But why must a man be seated when a car is burning and he refused to do anything to live?
Was the matter discussed in cabinet?
Koro's death? Yes. Not as an agenda item for the whole panoply of the ministers and council, the whole panoply to be seated. Say, today we are going to discuss nothing but the death, mysterious death of Koro Ceesay. Never. It was on the 27th, after the burial, we had a cabinet meeting, and there was this, I don't know, for want of better word, I wish I had the dictionary here, you know. Honestly, Edward, I was in cabinet, Yankuba Toure was there, Mr. Wada was there, former Secretary General, the late Mustafa Wada, the Cabinet Secretary, Tamsir Demambai, was there, Susan Mafa Ogu was there, Aminata Fall, I think, of course, Balaji Humpa was also there at that meeting. And Edward struggled to make a eulogy, a tribute to Usman Koro Ceesay. Less than 2 minutes.
Why do you think he struggled?
I think his struggling was born out of some constraint on his part.
Guilt?
Most likely, could be. But his tribute was not more than 2 minutes. I don't remember Yankuba Toure saying anything, but Edward asked if the civilian ministers, they have anything to contribute. We all shut our mouths and said nothing, because we knew what happened. Everybody.
What did you know happened?
Well, we suspected.
Tell us what you suspected.
I, as Attorney General, I suspected that Koro's death was a clear case of murder. And I associated with the $35 million.
Dollars, you said.
Dollars. That was borrowed from the Exim Bank in Taipei by, negotiated by Ibu Jalo. And as Attorney General, even where I signed the agreement that yes, the FPRC is the government of the day, they can borrow money in the name of the country. I was surprised to hear on the BBC when Sadada was interviewed. That was the time I knew 35 million was paid to the government. I was lucky I left.
At cabinet, it was never discussed.
That 35 million was
to be borrowed.
No, it was never. This was negotiated by, it's Ibu Jalo who was the front man anyway. There was nothing laid before cabinet that a sum of $35 million was being negotiated with the Exim Bank in Taipei. And if these things are easily to be proven, the cabinet papers can be assessed. You can get them maybe from the archives. If there was any cabinet deliberations on the borrowing of the $35 million, it will be indicated. Tamsir Demamba
dollars.
was the secretary to cabinet.
Dollars, you meant to say.
Maybe the dollar is a very strong currency.
Yes. So, Mr. Marong, how about on the return of Yaya Jammeh to the country? Was the death of Koro Ceesay discussed in cabinet?
When he came, he also in cabinet made a passing statement on the death of Koro. He said, people are accusing council members sanctioning the death of Koro. And he said, why would council order the death of Koro? Because if he was not doing his job or if he was not satisfied with him, he would just simply terminate his appointment. That Koro was doing his business, with quantum, and they appointed him as minister. I think he was formerly appointed permanent secretary, subsequently minister of finance. I met him in cabinet anyway. And he said, Edward said it was an accident.
Jammeh?
Jammeh said, act of God.
Inconsistency.
Yes?
As a lawyer, what did that send to your mind?
Well, it's telling. It's a telling statement. Because we all know what is an act of God. So I don't know what evidence they have to say it's an accident or it's an act of God. Koro died. Maybe his burning being unnatural, he might perhaps say it's an act of God. But, Koro's death, all the civilian ministers believe Koro was killed. I don't know about the soldiers.
Did you sense any form of sorrow on the part of the military members of the council?
Never. Nothing. The Germans said, zilch, nothing whatsoever. You see, Koro's case was never discussed. I mean, it was a non-issue at all, none whatsoever. Because if it was an issue, it was a case that would be constantly being brought before cabinet at all discussions. What do we do? What should we do about this? How do we go about it? And remember, council, not a single butut was paid to Koro's family. Nothing. So for Koro, it's a non-issue. If you don't bother about Koro, he died in an accident, finish.
Ordinarily, mysterious deaths of that nature, the Ministry of Justice may organize a coroner's inquest.
Yes.
Was a coroner's inquest organized?
There was no coroner's inquest because the matter was never his case was never referred to us to ask for a coroner's inquest.
So you mean that the police never sent anything to the Ministry of Justice?
Not a single piece of paper was sent to the ministry about Koro's death. The DPP at the time was Justice Kamba, and the vice was Fatubam Bensouda. Nothing was sent from the Interior Ministry to the Ministry of Justice that, can you please, talking about possibility of an inquest into Koro's death? No docket was sent, nothing, no suspects.
Were you aware of any investigations that was carried out by the police?
Not to my knowledge. The DPP never told me. The Solicitor General never told me. We received no correspondence from the Interior Ministry that they were carrying out an investigation into Koro's death.
We received testimony today from the then Minister of Interior, Lamin Kababajo.
Yes.
He described the lack of investigations or any successful investigations to some form of negligence on his part. Would you describe it as that, or you think it's more to it, there's more to it than that?
It was not negligent. It was a willful refusal to investigate. And Yaya Jammeh told him in my presence When I went to collect a fax number from Yajame to send an indictment to Sadauda Karaba Jawara, after the commission finding, I think it's the Algali Commission, that we should send an indictment to Sadauda. He says he's got his fax number. He asked Mr. Wada. Of course, Mr. Wada told him, I don't have it. Even if he got it, he will never. I went to collect that fax number. Yajame was seated there in his usual dark glasses, beret, and military fatigues to get that fax number. Kababayo came in, and he came in. Yajame told him, regarding your investigations in the Koro's death, proceed with it quietly. Those are his very words. Proceed with it quietly. Kaba sat there. He didn't say yes or no.
What did you understand Yaya Jammeh to mean from what he said and his gesticulations?
I think what I conclude from that statement is that do nothing. Because if you do nothing, yeah, it's quiet. There's quietness or quiescence when nothing is done. I mean, if there is thunder and lightning, there's turbulence. But if you are not to do anything, it's quiet. So proceed a bit quietly, meaning do nothing, because you have to call people you suspect. You have to get in touch with the police investigators, the CID, to investigate. I don't know whether at that time they have a forensics department, but the CID should have been investigating, going to the scene of the crime, look at the car, whether the burning was inside or it started from the engine and spread into the vehicle.
What do you say to the suggestion by Lamin Kababajo that that event never occurred? He was never told by Yaya Jammeh.
Yes, because...
He was never told in your presence
yes.
To investigate or to proceed with that case quietly, as you put it.
What he told me was, proceed with your investigations quietly. Kaba was there.
He denied it. What do you say to that?
Well, it's unfortunate. He's covering himself up or somebody. It's a cover-up. Because why would I come up with that type of statement, fabricate? You know? In fact, he's denying it. It's not helpful to him. He should have said yes. He told me to proceed quietly, because in the end, nothing happened. Koro's case just went into thin air. So he could have said yes. He told me. So maybe he has an ulterior motive, maybe covering somebody up. But Kaba was there, and Jammeh told, those were his exact words. Proceed with your investigations quietly. He didn't tell me don't. But whether there was anything done about Koro's case, that evidence is now known to everybody. Nothing happened.
In your view, was it just negligence on the part of Kaba, or was it a deliberate system failure to investigate?
System failure on the part of the Interior Ministry. Because if you say systemic failure, it's a very encompassing statement. Because we are part of the system.
Let me qualify it. Systemic failure on the part of those institutions that were entrusted with the responsibility to investigate crimes.
It was a failure, but a failure from the top. Because if the command should come, you know, from the top to the subordinate, from the superordinate to the subordinate. So if the boss didn't give the orders, those below cannot move. So it was a question of, yes, is Koro important to me, or is my job, my survival? That is it. It's Koro or my survival. So that must be the driving force that might have led to systemic refusal. It's not failure. The system was there. well-qualified people who did training in criminalistics. It's not a fair, it's refusal. Maybe you can say refusal and failure. Because if you refuse to do something, it means you failed to do it. But the system was there. All the apparatus was there. But to put it in motion, that must have come from somebody, the command to say do it. But if I say, yes, I don't do this, can you do it? Close this chapter, you'll close it. So,
subsequently, Ibu Jallow left the government and he made accusations, or he wrote articles suggesting that Mr. Koro Ceesay was killed at the house of Yankuba Toure by Edward Singate and Yankuba Toure and some of their subordinates.
Well, that's the theory at the time, and the theory still persists. And there was no evidence to dislodge it. There would have been evidence showing otherwise, but up till now, the theory, that's the theory, that he was killed. Because I heard that myself. And that's the theory, that Koro was lured into Yankuba's apartment, and that's why they dealt him the deadliest blow of all. And according to rumors, I had a caravan of speeding vehicles went through Farato heading towards Jambu, and it was drizzling at the moment. And there was a Mercedes-Benz among a convoy of Nissan patrols in with darkened glass, darkened windows. That people told me. And that morning, a vehicle was found, allegedly involved in an accident at a culvert in Jambu Forest, and it was incinerated. So that's the theory so far, and it's not been dislodged.
We have received information, or rather Ibu Jallow published, that from the money that was received from Taiwan, he brought $5 million cash to Yaya Jammeh. And Yaya Jammeh, upon seeing the money, was ecstatic. He fell on the ground and was dancing. Yes. And that from that money, Yaya Jammeh gave him, Ibu Jallow, $100,000. $100,000 to Kababajo, $100,000 to Edward Singate, and $100,000 to Yankuba Toure.
Yes, council members, the soldiers, did they give any money to Mr. Marong? Because I was not important. Yes, they are the ones who are important. They think we owe them a duty because they said they dislodged a corrupt government, which is not true. The evidence came to light who's corrupt. So, Ibu Jallow might be telling the truth, but if that money was shared, I knew about it, the 35 million, and from people who had Sadauda making the comment about money being saved in an account under the secret code J. Yes, that's the time I knew that this money came, and then I was then already deployed to the Post Authority after a slight cabinet reshuffle. And I thank God I left.
And from everything that you know,
yes,
what is your conclusion
yes,
as to what happened to Usman Koro Ceesay?
Now, about the 35 million $35 million, and the subsequent death of Koro, and the exclusion of Koro from negotiating the loan, and there was no amendment to the Loans Act. Okay, the negotiations by Bujalo, the non-amendment to the Loans Act, and the subsequent death of Koro Ceesay, after the money was presumably received, they link up. From my estimation, they link up. That there must have been some refusal on the part of Koro why he was excluded from negotiating the loan as finance minister, even though the legal instrument was not amended to authorize Ibujalo to negotiate the loan.
And as a result of that?
So my conclusion is, as far as a reasonable man I am, and having studied criminology in the United States, my conclusion is Koro was killed. His body was put in the Mercedes-Benz in a vehicle, driven to Jambur, to a culvert. He is placed at the steering wheel, and he got burnt. Because somebody who's alive, we are not restrained. Even if you are restrained, you'll do some struggle to get out of that car. But this man just sat there, the car is burning, and he was burnt out. He's alive. No reasonable man, even the lowest intelligent person, will even refuse.
So essentially, you're suggesting, instead of sacking him, they silenced him permanently.
Maybe he was silenced.
Silenced him permanently.
And properly. He was not always silent, he was also properly silenced. That's what happened to Koro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marong. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counsel, and thank you very much, Mr. Marong,
Thank you.
for your testimony, and thank you also for agreeing to come to the Commission.
I want to say one thing, Commissioner.
Please go ahead.
I'm sure you, as an American product, you read about the anthropologist Margaret Mead. He said, the only time evil prosper in society is when good men sit and fold their hands and do nothing. I'm not a good man, but I thought I have a moral obligation to come before this commission and tell you what I know post-assassination of Koro Ceesay. I thought I should come and share that information with you. So the ball is now in a court to separate the wheat from the chaff and draw your conclusions. But for me, Koro was my friend. He was friend to everybody in the cabinet. Koro was overwhelmed. Koro was totally overwhelmed. He was utterly betrayed. At the very moment when Koro realized that they are assaulting him to kill him, could you imagine how he would have felt? The betrayal. Somebody who loved his country and worked for his country. You kill him for love of money. Thank you.
You have not yet been discharged, Honorable Attorney General.
Not ready yet. We won't let you go, at least, but just to thank you enormously and express our appreciation for that decision to come forward and testify on this very difficult matter, not just for our Koro's family, but for the entire country.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
And I'm glad to see Adelaide Ceesay and Usainu Gallo, because when I was at the social welfare, I get to know Adelaide and Mr. Charlo also. Then you were the Minister of Education. Yes, both of you, were it? Yes. Dr. Ceesay was, used to be our host in Washington, D.C. Then he was, I think you finished your PhD then. And we were going to, I was a student there then, and he was telling me, Dr. Alassane Ceesay, he's a microbiochemist, and they lodged us for the All Africa Day celebrations and Gambia Independence Day. He was a very nice man, and I'm glad I saw you in good health. And I do pray for the Commission. They are doing a very good job. There must be justice. There is no peace without justice. It's the first thing. Justice, and then we have peace.
Please,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. You can go, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we are not going right away, but at the weekend. You want to ask your questions now?
He's gone.
And we'll bring it. No, I know. Interesting. Okay, Council, we have arrangements for tomorrow morning. Is that correct?
I thought, yes, you would make some announcements about tomorrow.
We will. Okay.
Well, okay. I thought the chair would, but anyway.
No. I'm not sure that the arrangements we talked about earlier have been finalized. So,
but if you do finalize it, then the